Hello, cultural studies class. Okay, we're here now to talk about how Judaism spread around Europe and Asia and also the world. Africa went everywhere. Okay, so we've got the 12 tribes, and Joshua's leading them. And when Joshua dies, we've still got, this is my very crude map. This is not at all what the area looked like. But, it was Canaan that the 12 tribes had taken over. And you had 3 tribes down here, which meant you had 9 tribes up here. But there was no one ruler. Like each tribe had its own kind of set of rules. And each tribe, each tribe did a whole bunch of fighting with outsiders. So even though they all kind of had the same fundamental beliefs, they were all separate. That's important to know. They were separate, and they didn't think of themselves as one land. So there were lots and lots of hard times. There were like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. All these different tribes were always trying to fight off outsiders that were coming in and trying to keep their lands together. And it was a tough time. This was called the time of Judges. Now, when you think the word judge, throw that out of your mind. We're not talking about that kind of judge. We're talking about a judge, which is a ruler. And at this time, each little tribe had its own judge. And the judge was usually either a great warrior or a prophet. So there was one pretty famous prophet, and her name was Ruth. And I'm going to tell you Ruth's story. So Ruth was not an Israelite. She lived in this area called Moab. It was outside these tribes, like let's say it was over here. And an Israelite moved to Moab. It's unimportant which tribe he came from, doesn't really matter, but an Israelite moved to Moab and married this lady named Ruth. Well, then that guy died. I forgot, he had brought his mom with him. This Israelite guy and his mom moved to Moab. The guy married Ruth. Then the guy died. And when he died, his mom said she was going to move back to her tribe. And Ruth said, okay, well, you're my mother-in-law and we've been bonded and I love you. You're my family. So I'm going to go back with you. She went back to the tribe with her mother-in-law. And when she got there, she converted. And she was like, wow, you Israelites, I really like your religion. I like your belief system. I'm going to be one of you. And when she became one of them, she became so serious about it and so dedicated to it that she actually became a judge. This lady that wasn't even an Israelite before, not an Israelite by birth, she converted and she became a judge. Well, that's Ruth. She's a big name in Judaism and Christianity, and I don't know, perhaps Islam. Sorry, I don't know the answer to that. And so that was the time of Judges. A judge when we're talking about this time period in the history of Judaism, a judge is a ruler. They were usually a warrior or a prophet. So along comes this guy, Saul. And Saul unifies all 12 tribes and makes them one kingdom, and he becomes the king. Now, for the first time in history, all 12 tribes are one land, and their king is Saul. And he names his nation Israel because they were the Israelites, right? Because Abram had Isaac and Isaac had Jacob, but Jacob changed his name to Israel. And so the people that followed Israel were called Israelites. And now we're talking hundreds of years later, Canaan, all the 12 tribes of Israel are joined together by this guy, Saul, who names himself King of Israel. It's not called Canaan anymore. Now it's Israel. When Saul died, his head warrior named David took over. So David was the second king of Israel, and he was a warrior. He was the best. He was the biggest, baddest, strongest, fiercest warrior of Saul. He was the king. And then when he died, his son, Solomon, becomes the third king of Israel. And Solomon did two really big things in the Bible, in the Hebrew Bible and the Christian Bible. There's the book of Proverbs. And what did I say a proverb was? A proverb is little wise sayings. Well, Solomon wrote a lot of them. For the book of Proverbs, Solomon, he didn't write all of them, but he wrote a whole lot of them. A lot of the Proverbs are from Solomon. But he also built the temple of Jerusalem. Let me fix that for you so you can read it. Jerusalem. I forgot to tell you that when Saul made his kingdom of Israel, he made Jerusalem the capital. So Solomon built a temple in Jerusalem. It was the first Israeli huge big temple, and he didn't personally build it. He had it built. People built it for him, but he's the one that said, we're going to make a temple, and it's going to be the Temple of Jerusalem. When Solomon died, Israel split. There were these big fights over who's going to be our leader, and there was a split. So here's Israel, and there was a big split here, and the top remained being called Israel, but the bottom was called Judah. Judah, so the religion of these people, the people of Judah, was called Judaism, And people that follow Judaism are called Jews. So that's where Jews comes from. Jews, Judaism, Judah. So Solomon died. There were arguments. Israel split. Israel stayed in the north. Judah went in the south. And down here in Judah, the descendants of Solomon ruled. That's a no. The descendants of Solomon ruled Judah. All right. In the year 722 BCE, I'm going to draw a little timeline here. So here's where we are, 2020. Here's 0. If this is negative 500, negative 1,000, so about here, so 722 BCE, this empire called Assyria, the Assyrian Empire, conquered Israel. Okay, I'm going to draw a picture again because I know how hard it is to follow all this. So Israel is up here, Judah's down here, and the Assyrian Empire conquers Israel, takes it for themselves, say, we control you now, Israel, you belong to us. They weren't very cool to the Israelis. They took the people that lived here, they took a whole bunch of them and they shipped them out of Israel. And the Israelis, they were really, really treated very, very badly. Some of them escaped and they came down here to Judah. But other ones that weren't able to escape were captured and were sent away. 100 years later. So now we are in 622 BCE. Oh, sorry. Sometimes I can't write and speak at the same time. In 622 BCE, Babylon, this was the empire of Babylon, which is modern day Iraq. Where you think of as Iraq used to be called Babylon. Well, Babylon rose up against the Assyrian Empire. These were two big, great empires at the time. And Babylon starts getting stronger and stronger, and they conquered Judah. So now Babylon has Judah. And while they were fighting, Babylon completely destroyed Jerusalem, which was right about here. Jerusalem is here. Babylon destroyed Jerusalem, and while they were destroying it, they destroyed the Temple of Solomon. This is a really, really huge, serious thing in Jewish history. Their temple was destroyed. That was in 587 BCE. Just in case you didn't hear me say that was important, this is really important. Hopefully you understand what I mean when I keep repeating that this is important. It's very important to know that in 587, the Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem. And while destroying Jerusalem, they took the Temple of Solomon. All right. And they, the Babylonians, I'm going to write that out for you so you understand what I'm saying. Babylonians. The Babylonians did the same thing to the people of Judah that the Assyrians did to the people of Israel. They took the people, they were awful, mean, and horrible to them. They pulled them out of their homeland and sent them away. So now there are people from and remember, the people from Israel and the people from Judah, they have the same religious beliefs. So the Assyrians have sent the Israelis all over. The Babylonians have sent the people from Judah all over. So now their people have kind of spread out. Well, eventually, the Persia, which is modern day Iran, the Persians take over Israel. They rise up, they destroy the Assyrians, and they take control of Israel. Now, Persia at the time, I'm going to switch to a map for a second. I thought I had a map open. Sorry, I thought I already had this open. So here's Iran. This was called Persia at the time. And they controlled a whole bunch of this land all in here. There's a tiny little space right here, which was Israel and Judah. It's so small, I would have to blow it up to see it, but I'm not going to do that. So Persia controlled a whole bunch of this land. They were nice to the Jews, and they told the Jews, you can go back home if you want. And remember, it's been hundreds of years. This isn't like I was kidnapped from my land and now I get to go home. This is like my great-grandchildren, but they still have such a tie, this emotional tie to Israel, Judah, Jerusalem. They want to go home. So the Persians were nice. And they said, you can go home. You can live wherever you want to live. So a whole bunch of them that had been spread out all around in here, a bunch of them went back to live in and around Jerusalem. But some of them didn't. And what was so cool was the Persian Empire was spread through Egypt and all like Syria, Turkey, all this area. And because the Persians were nice to them, they could freely move inside the Persian Empire. And so they even came all the way up here into Central Asia. Lots and lots of Jews came up here. Now, so we've gone from the Assyrians in Israel to the Babylonians in Judah, and now the Persians have taken over the north, again, Israel. Now, another takeover in 330 BCE, Alexander the Great from Greece conquered the Persian Empire, the entire Persian Empire. He conquered all of it. And now his empire is much, much bigger. So he was here from Greece, and he controlled a whole bunch of this land. So now there's like this huge circle here that's all part of the Greek Empire. And the Jews spread throughout all of it. So, a whole bunch of people still felt this call, stayed in and around Jerusalem. But a bunch of them spread out. So they're all over this huge area. So now that they're spread all out, they've got this thing called a diaspora. Diaspora. And a diaspora means maybe if if you're familiar enough with the English language, you might look at that and you see the word disperse. That means to spread out. So they've got this huge area where Jews are all over. And anywhere where there's Jewish influence is part of the Jewish diaspora. But because there are Jews everywhere, they can't all worship in one temple in Jerusalem that was destroyed anyway. And so they made their own places of worship called a synagogue. A synagogue is the Jewish meeting place. Like Christians call them churches, Muslims call them mosques, Sikhs call them temples, Hindus call them temples. Well, Jews call it a synagogue. And so the Greeks really didn't like the Jews. They were mean to them. They didn't treat them fairly. They weren't nice to them at all. And the Jews sometimes would rise up and have like violent rebellions against the Greeks. There was this really famous family in the 100s BCE, not any one specific year. It was a family like me, and then my child, and then my child's child, and then my child's child's child, and then my child's 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 child. They're all my family. So there was this history in the 100s BCE, the Maccabees. They were a famous Jewish family that rebelled against the Greeks. And they rebelled, and they won this rebellion. And when they won the rebellion, that story is the story of Hanukkah. Hopefully you've all heard of Hanukkah. It's a big Jewish holiday. Well, that holiday is based on when the Maccabees won a rebellion against the Greeks. Okay, so all right, let me back up because it's important you all know all of this. Here's my little version of where the Jews lived. Here's Israel, and here's Judah. And you have the Assyrians that took over Israel, and the Babylonians that took over Judah, and then the Persians, and then I don't want to leave anything out. Yeah, the Persians, and then the Greeks. Now come the Romans. The Romans conquered Greece. So now the Romans control the area. The Romans were even worse to the Jews than the Greeks were. The Romans did not like the Jews. The Jews did not like the Romans. The Jews were always rebelling. This was in the year 6 CE, the Common Era. So now if we're on a timeline, we've passed 0, and now we're in 6 CE. That's when the Romans won the land, conquered the Greeks. And they called the area, the land of Israel, they called it Judea, because that's where the Jews were. They didn't call it Israel, it was Judea. Judea, land of the Jews. And man, they really didn't like the Jews. They were really, really horrible and disrespectful to them. And the Jews rebelled, and in the year 70 CE, the Romans destroyed the second temple of Jerusalem. I'm just realizing right now that I forgot to tell you that they rebuilt it. Anyway, so when the Temple of Solomon had been destroyed, the Jews rebuilt it. So it was destroyed a first time, and now the Romans have destroyed it a second time. The Romans killed and enslaved thousands and thousands of Jews. They really didn't like the Jews, and like their destruction, they didn't just destroy the temple, they destroyed the whole city. They went in like ransacked, destroyed businesses, destroyed homes, burned down the city, burned down the temple, destroyed everything. And that was to try to like put the Jews in their place, because the Jews were rebelling against them because they had been treated poorly. So the Romans came in and were like, oh yeah, this is what we think about you rebelling. And they destroyed everything. Okay, so 70 CE is when the Romans destroyed the second temple of Jerusalem. And then they did this really, really mean thing. In the year 135 CE, this is a whole lifetime between 70 and 135. This is like 65 years. It's been a long time. And the Jews are still rebelling against the Romans. The Romans did this thing where the Romans changed the name of Judea. They changed the name of Judea to the official name of the country now is named off of ancient enemies of the Jews. They did this just to make them angry. So the Romans changed the name of Judea to the name of ancient enemies of the Jews. And the ancient enemy of the Jews were the Philistines, the Philistines. And so they named it Palestine. This was a huge, huge insult. And the Romans did it purposely to insult them. The Romans were really mean to the Jews. The Jews were always rebelling against them, rising up, having these violent rebellions. Even when the Romans destroyed their city, destroyed their temple, the Jews still rebelled. And so as this like really, really mean insult, the Romans changed the name of their country from Judea, which means land of the Jews, They changed the name of their country to the name of their ancient enemies, and they changed it to Palestine. So, yeah, that was a really big one. So today, 2020, there are about 14 million Jews in the world. That's not very many. I mean, there are cities bigger than 14 million people, and that's all the Jews that are left in the world. But what came out of the Jews was Christianity. And Christianity is a huge world religion. And then also over here is Islam, the Muslim faith. They're all Abrahamic. So all three of these religions claim Abraham as their like spiritual father. Islam doesn't necessarily directly come out of Judaism, but Christianity does. And now I'm just going to do this one little thing. Let's see. If this is the world population. About 25% of the world's population is Muslim, and 75% of the world's population is not Muslim. About 33% of the world's population is Christian, which means 66% is not Christian. 16% of the world has no religion. And all other religions are in here. So why do we spend so much time learning about Judaism? Is because it's really important for modern day knowing what's going on in the world right now. Like Christians and Muslims make up more than half of all the people on earth. And they all have very similar beliefs. So if we're going to understand people, then we should understand their culture. And part of their culture is what they believe. What you should also understand is this other 50% of the world and what they believe. Because if you're going to understand a person, you should understand their culture and their background and their belief system and where they're from and how they think about the world. So that's why we learn this stuff. Okay, finished. I'm out of here. I'll see you guys in class.